Hey Internet, Gordon with PC World here. Here we go. This one's gonna work. Hey Internet, Gordon with PC World. I'm here with Dr. Ian Cutress with Hey Internet, Gordon with PC World here with Dr. Ian Cutress. By the way, go over to Dr. Ian. Hey Internet, Gordon with Dr. Ian Cutress of Tech Potato. By the way, go over there, like and subscribe, and of course smash that bell button on his channel. The reason I have Ian here is I want to know, is AI, and Ian is one of the experts in our space on AI, is AI the new core wars? Because let's be honest, if Intel or AMD really gave consumers 32 cores, 64 cores in a consumer socket, I don't think people would get excited about it. Like, it would be about it's getting excited about like another 300 megahertz at this point, right? Like, oh, 6.2 gigahertz.
It's the law of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that going forward, the AI hotness is here, and the only thing that you will judge a new laptop or a new desktop. By the way, this laptop is the first laptop we have seen with an actual AI accelerator. It has Ryzen AI, it has a new Ryzen 9 7940 HS chip with AI acceleration. But is AI the only thing we're going to care about going forward?
We're in this weird dichotomy space. So yes, obviously frequency wars, how much frequency you have, core wars, how many cores you have, GPU, how many GPU cores you have, frequency, and then you obviously have different tiers of performance parts within that. AI, or machine learning, however you want to delineate between the two, is still so nascent that what all the companies who are doing it, whether it's AMD with the new Ryzen AI engine, whether it's Intel with the upcoming VPU in Meteor Lake, whether it's Qualcomm with their AI engine, Hexagon DSP, they're all talking about experiences right now, and because it's more of a software issue than a hardware issue to a certain extent these days. Being able to provide users with the experience of what AI can do. I mean, the whole concept of having this machine learning hardware is, you could do it on a CPU, but you could do graphics on a CPU. Why do we not do graphics on a CPU? Because it's more power efficient to do it on a GPU. So why don't we do AI on a GPU? Well, because it's more efficient to do it in dedicated silicon on the chip. So you have this scale up and down of what works best for AI. So we're getting to a point now where we have sufficient performance to do things like background bokeh blur or eye gaze correction. We've seen that already in the big discrete GPUs. Maybe we can bring that down to something that's more tenable inside a mobile form factor SoC. To your point about, are we in the core wars right now? The whole point about core wars is we talk about the specifications. Which one is better than the other? You can talk about architecture, you can talk about frequency, you can talk about number of cores. When it comes to the AI that we have currently in this space, we don't have easily recognizable metrics for that. For two reasons.
Right.
It's not only the raw performance, but also the real world performance. And describing both in a non-technical way to a consumer audience is difficult. Yeah,
obviously people know if I have 32 cores, I have a higher Cinebench score, or I have a higher Geekbench or a higher Handbrake encode, I get more. How exactly is a consumer going to be able to judge?
Because in AI we don't have cores in a natural sense. There's no decoder, there's no front end, no back end. So what a lot of the companies are doing now, especially in the smartphone space, because that's where AI has kind of taken off a little bit easier, is they just talk about raw throughput. In enterprise, we're used to talking about flops, just the raw performance of the compute you have. Because these aren't floating point operations, most of them are integer, we call them ops in AI. So we're talking about giga ops and tera ops. So everybody with AI hardware will talk about the amount of tera ops they have inside their chip, which is a bit of a misnomer because the software doesn't always run at the peak of, you can talk about the number of gigaflops or teraflops you have in your GPU, but your game is spiking as and when it needs the performance, right, to hit your frame time. So AI will be the same. You'll have this tera ops value of the dedicated AI hardware. You can then talk about the power that consumes, so ops per watt. So especially in mobile form factor devices like this, that's going to be important. aside from that, there's no real good fundamental way to talk about raw performance. Now, we could talk about benchmark performance. We do have some AI benchmarks that are already out there. Geekbench 6 implements some of this. Procyon is going down that way. There's no sort of Cinebench for AI, which is unfortunate, but that's indicative of the market we're currently in. We have the hardware is such rapidly improving year on year, or almost month on month on month. The software is evolving even faster. So finding the right way to implement these machine learning algorithms is evolving. Imagine a different x86 CPU coming out every month or every 2 months, but with a fundamentally different architecture every time. You can't just create one benchmark and point at 6 different designs, because you'll be unoptimized for all of them.
Right.
So that's still a work in progress in machine learning, especially for consumers. I mean, at the end of the day, it does mean that Intel, AMD, and again, Qualcomm, Apple, they don't really speak about performance right now. They speak about experience, and because that's also what more widely applicable to to a consumer audience.
Right, and to me, it sort of speaks to the problem, as a hardware community is for reviewers. We're always looking for ways to measure it, and we do have this issue where if you have standardized benchmarks and you're running somewhat older, like even a 2-year-old version of it, it doesn't really move that much, because honestly, there hasn't been the revolutionary performance impact in a CPU, general purpose, in 2 years. But like you're saying, if it's like every month, then your benchmarks are essentially outdated by the time you publish them. Like the performance metrics are kind of meaningless if the software has shifted so much.
Well, we could point at gaming, right? Because we do get driver updates seemingly every week, and sometimes they add in additional performance. So it could just be a case of every time you want to do an AI test, you just have to get the latest variant. But it's arguably more difficult than that, because the hardware becomes so optimized in very specific directions for machine learning. You may have a hardware that's focused very much on visual. We may end up with hardware very focused on things like ChatGPT with large language models, natural language processing. And there are also features like Adobe Generative Fill that's currently in beta, that's being tested a lot. Now, that could all, again, be run on CPU, or it could be run on GPU, slightly more power efficient, or it's being run on this dedicated AI hardware. One of the unfortunate issues right now, I think, as well, is some of this AI hardware is relying on things that aren't standards. Right. So imagine if you have a model that you run on one machine and you get a result. You run exactly the same model. Say, imagine it's like a Cinebench render, but you got a completely different result on a different AI hardware, because they're implementing certain things in the architecture differently because they're not standards. It's a space that's unfortunately doesn't have many data type standards in order to do that. I've spoken with Intel, and they've said across all their hardware, whether it's CPU, GPU, AI, they're trying to make sure it's unified. You get the unified result. AMD, I think, wants to do something similar, but even competing against companies. Maybe it's not much of an issue with AI, but in terms of, for us, for benchmarking, I mean, as enthusiasts, we want to see the scale. We don't care about binary yes, no. We want to see the scale, performance per watt.
Right.
It's not there yet, because of a lot of issues which consumers shouldn't care about, but unfortunately they're getting the hardware this year to do it.
Yeah, I mean, again, because this is real hardware, it's got, I mean, honestly, you've got the CPU, you've got a dedicated, you've got the dedicated Ryzen AI, you've got the integrated graphics in the Ryzen chip, and then you have the GeForce. This has an RTX 4070 in here, mobile, so.
Yeah. And the guys that get these laptops, speaking about AMD specifically, so we've got this 7040 series that has the AI engine, but it very is like a version 0.3, because it will only be available to certain business customers in order to develop their particular software using Vitis AI, which is a Xilinx-based software platform. It's not TensorFlow, PyTorch, sort of typical machine learning environment. So as a result, AMD is working very closely with Microsoft to enable it through the Microsoft ecosystem. So things like opening your camera app and getting background blur, we've actually just tried to play with it a little bit now, and eye tracking, things like that. So they want it more to be an integrated consumer or business experience, not a development platform right now. I think once AMD with the AI engine and then Intel with the Meteor Lake VPU, once they become developer friendly, we're going to get a number of people coming out with different ideas on how to use them, and I'm pretty sure they'll think of plenty of ideas that either AMD or Intel haven't thought of.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, this just all points to the Wild West we're in right now. It's like
Yes.
it's almost like we're seeing a reset because again, we've gone through gigahertz wars, we've gone through core wars. Now it's like it's this wide open field where everybody gets to come up with how they're going to market it as
Yep.
well. Do you do the teraops as you're saying? Do you do teraops per watts? And like I don't.
Or do you talk about images generated per second on Stable Diffusion, but maybe you've got a very customized Stable Diffusion model, and yeah, we get into all that tit for tat. I will say that as we progress, between these wars, frequency, gigahertz, GPU, whatever, it becomes more and more complicated to understand, and ultimately, what is enough?
Yeah.
I think we'll only figure that out in machine learning once we have the use cases available to us. Things like having localized Copilot, things like helping do your essay generation or things like that. It's Wild West for a good couple of years.
And I think the other thing too is like, a lot of times consumers want to know, I need to know what is the best, like the
Yes.
one thing that's the best. And it kind of sounds like there is no sort of one thing, right? Because you've got, like in this laptop itself, you've got the general purpose CPU cores, you've got a dedicated AI core, and then you've got the discrete GPU, as well as integrated GPU.
Yeah.
It's almost like you kind of want all of them in a way because you don't know where the future is going to end up that you want the performance in.
Yeah, performance, and I think especially for mobile performance efficiency, people have been asking, well, if I run a machine learning workload, will it run on the CPU, the GPU, or the AI engine, or can it run across all three, and or can it choose which one to run on? So there's some companies are coming to the realization that maybe I want to run it on device, maybe I want to run it in the cloud, which is more power efficient, or which is more, do I need the latency instead? Though running across different CPU, GPU, AI isn't a thing yet, in the same way that in a game, your rendering happens on the GPU, but perhaps some of the control happens on the CPU. You don't actually do the rendering on the CPU. So there's also things like that to get to understand as well. Again, very nascent, very early time space.
Wow.
And rapidly, growing.
Yeah, and it just says it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy for quite a few years. But the thing to me that
I got a question real quick, Ian. Would you give up general purpose cores for more dedicated function cores like AI cores?
Okay, let me rephrase that. Do we have enough cores? General. It's the whole point about using newer process nodes is to get more transistors, and what do we spend those transistors on? Apple spends them on video encoding accelerators, and they're doing very well with that. Do we spend more transistors now on machine learning? I think it will grow, and we'll need the metrics to essentially confirm how that will grow. To be honest, really, as a desktop, I want everything. As a mobile device, I want the environment that gives me the most battery life, I think, or for the performance, the most battery life. That's my bugbear right now, battery life. That's only because I have a laptop that's I kind of screwed up.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that kind of brings up the other thing is like, because when you think, so this laptop has Ryzen AI, but it has a GeForce RTX 4070 in it.
Yeah.
That does that whole fancy eye correction stuff and blurring too. Why in the world do I need to duplicate that exact same functionality elsewhere in the system?
Yeah, no, you'll only use it for one.
But there is an advantage though, right? You were pointing this out earlier.
Yeah. The power efficiency of running it on the AI cores. But for this device, Razer Blade 14, it's good. The idea is that it's a gaming laptop for streaming, but you also may still be using it for Teams and Zoom.
Right.
And so you're having that lower power, or for my thing as a content creator, I want some of those applications to be available offline. So maybe I've got a pre-recorded video, I want to adjust the eye tracking on for a certain section. So having those tools available would be really nice. I've been begging NVIDIA to make broadcast available for content creators like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's, to your point, it's still the Wild West. We're still trying to figure out the exact use cases, where it works, why it works, and where it works best.
Okay, so it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy for both you as a consumer. It's going to be messy for us as hardware reviewers to tell you what is important. But it's also very exciting because actually getting in the ground floor of some, changing technology like AI is about as exciting as what it was like when we saw the first, CPU in a lot of ways, right?
So both Xilinx for the AI engine AMD and the Movidius team or the AI team at Intel are absorbing all the feedback they can get for future generations. If we keep coming up with ideas, with requests, they want to implement and cover most of the market that they possibly can. And this is typically a more embedded style, corporate thing. So now moving it into consumer means that they have to think in a consumer mindset. So yeah, no, they're being sponges right now, and it's really exciting the fact that they're reaching out to people like me, to people like Gordon, to take all that feedback. And the reason why we have feedback is A, from our own experiences, but B, from you guys, from all your comments down below, understanding what the audience wants to see in these parts. So please do get your comments in down below and let us know what you think the future of AI needs to be.
Actually, that's what I want the AI to do, is
to
comment for me on social media. So I don't even have to get into social media. I can go in, it learns how I'm going to respond, responds the exact same way.
You've been watching Black Mirror.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but if they have that technology, that would be wonderful, because it might actually help with the internet. But anyway, this has been very enlightening. Again, it's going to be a really exciting a few years now, because consumer client PCs with AI are formally here, and the actual AI wars are officially starting today. Anyway.
And I'll take one of these. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Ian Cuttress, who's running away with that Razer Blade 14. And go over and like and subscribe on his channel and click that bell button. And of course, continue to come back to PC World's channel for more awesome videos on where the PC is going. And hey, I need my laptop back.